Hi, I'm Patrick, and this is Behind the Screen, where I take you behind the DM screen in my campaign, The Five Kingdoms. When last we left our heroes, they were in an underground dungeon setting called the Orc Caverns. And they wake up in that area and they decide to keep going. They find a stairway going down further into the dungeons in a room full of lava. They go down this stairway and they find themselves in a training grounds for the orcs. It was one of the special companies of the orcs. They don't know this, and it doesn't really matter too much for the storyline. But anyways, they go through this dungeon, and at the bottom of it, they find a secret door into the treasure room for the orcs. And this treasure room is connected to another whole section of the dungeon. And in this dungeon is something that I am very worried that the players are not going to be able to handle properly. And honestly, I don't remember why I wanted to put a beholder in. Maybe it's just because I got a cool figure. Sometimes DMs do that. But I knew that it was a little bit much for my characters to handle. I mean, after all, they're not even 5th level yet, and it's a challenge rating of 13. So what, am I crazy? So I needed to set the encounter up in such a way that it gave them a chance without, being a giveaway. So what I did was I created a storyline behind it. And the dungeon in question has, I believe, 3 or 4 different air shafts that go straight up and down, most of which don't have any ladders or stairways in them. They're just a big air shaft. And so this makes a perfect beholder lair. They don't need ladders, they just float around. So inside the beholder's lair is a room that has a pentagram in it. And this pentagram is used to cast a gate spell. And the beholder has been using this for some time now to look into other worlds and, when possible, grab treasure or whatnot, or conquest. And just recently he opened up a world that had a death tyrant in it. And the death tyrant saw the gate open and came through right away. And suddenly the beholder has a death tyrant in its lair. So, unbeknownst to the characters, this death tyrant is wandering around the beholder's lair, and the beholder is looking for him. The beholder considers him an invader and wants very much so to kill the death tyrant. The death tyrant wants to find a way to get an upper hand on the beholder and has already realized that without some sort of outside help, he's pretty much toast. So he's been running around hiding from the beholder for a while. And this is the situation that the players find themselves in or enter into. And so they get behind the secret door, they're checking out the treasure room, and then they find that there's a hole in the floor, which is the air shaft, that they can go down into to get farther down in the dungeon. As they look up, they can see that the air shaft continues on up above into the ceiling, and they can see about 80, 100 feet up, it looks like sunlight coming in. So they decide that, that's another way out for them. And the secret door has closed, so they decide this is how they're going to escape. So once they make sure that they're able to escape, they decide to go further down into the dungeon. Now I had this plan that they were going to run across the death tyrant at a certain point on the map, and eventually they got to that point. Before that, however, they ran across a room that I said had what I called a vision stone in it. It was kind of like a crystal ball, except for it was a 2-room setup. One room had the crystal ball, and the other room had a set of columns that looked like it was holding up the ceiling, but in effect was actually a part of the magic item that the crystal ball was part of, called the Vision Stone. So if you're looking at the Vision Stone, you're standing in front of it, which activates it, and you're looking at the Vision Stone, while someone or something is in between the 2 columns, then the Vision Stone will give you 3 visions, or up to 3 visions, about what is placed between the columns. So the players find this room, and this is kind of like one of those fun rooms I like to put in there, and I have no idea what the players are going to use it for. It's pretty open-ended. A smart, intelligent, resourceful player who uses his or her imagination can probably wreck my game using something like this. So it's always risky when you put it in there. But I also knew that my players weren't the most inquisitive group that I've had. They're not the most experienced. So I can throw things like this at them and hopefully get away with it, and maybe generate some fun at the same time. And this worked wonderfully in that essence, not in the way that I expected. I kind of thought they would use this once they'd found the items at the bottom of the shaft to see what they were. But they had figured out recently that a character in one of the other groups, Loudus, was a, well, I don't know if traitor is the right word. He was basically Prince Larkin dreaming that he was Loudus, just like they've been dreaming that they were other characters, including Lazara, Yuli, Sable, and so on in Prince Larkin's group. So, you know, turnabout is fair play, but you know how that is. You know, if you're cheating on your wife and you find out she's cheating on you, suddenly you're like, hey, that's not okay. And I think that's how the players felt when they found out that Loudus was on occasion was Larkin, dreaming he was Loudus. And so because of that, Larkin knows a lot of things that they didn't realize that he knew. So because of this, they're now trying to figure out which character in this group is Larkin. And now, Bodaway, it should be noted, Bodaway has already figured out who Prince Larkin is in this group, and Bodaway, of course, is playing Winston in this group. So Winston knows that Myas is actually Prince Larkin. So Loudus has been outed in the Hobbit group. Bodaway knows that Myas is Prince Larkin in Jeff's group, but none of the other players have figured this out. So Luella and Idette try and get every single person, every single player to walk over and stand between the columns one at a time so they can watch the Vision Stone and get some visions about them. And again, while they don't say that they're trying to figure out which one of them is Prince Larkin, that's actually what they're trying to do. Now, I have to admit, as the GM, I did not know this. They didn't say they were trying to figure out which one was Prince Larkin. They just, you know, it looked to me like they were just having a lot of fun with the Vision Stone, and they wanted to see visions about every single person. Now, of course, as the GM, I know that there's a possibility that if Myas goes in front of the columns, that they might see something about that. And I'm trying to think about how to do that or not do that while I'm at the same time making up visions about everyone else. And I have to make up 3 visions about each person, which caught me a little off guard. But I tried to make up something about each one, and in doing so, sometimes I gave them a little inane information, and other times I was giving away things that maybe I didn't really plan on giving them. But hey, you know, they use the Vision Stone, fair game. They get to get what information they get, right? So they get around to Myas, and Myas somewhat sheepishly walks in between the 2 columns, and they start to see a couple visions about Myas. Now, like I said, I only gave them 2 visions of Myas. I was starting to run out of creative juices. It had nothing to do with anything other than that. But the important of the 2 visions that I gave them for Myas was that they see a battle. They see Myas. They see a couple of the other characters. They know there's a battle going on. They're not sure what they're fighting. But they see some beams of light that are shooting at them, one of which hits Myas directly in the chest. And Myas gets this look of horror on his face as his skin starts to go pale and then turn gray and then look like it's drying out, and finally, poof, he just turns into a dust that slowly falls to the floor and makes this little pile on the floor. And then the vision clears. Now, I will say, if I had known that they were trying to figure out who Prince Larkin was, because it was an ingenious idea, I definitely would have allowed them to figure out that Myas was Prince Larkin. I didn't know that was what they were up to, though. And it was funny, actually, they kind of suspected it might be Myas because I just ran out of imagination at the end. And I really only gave 2 visions for Myas because I just couldn't think of anything else. I'd gone through everybody else, and I was dry. Okay, so, but for some reason, they decided that because he only had 2 visions and everybody else had 3, that maybe he was Prince Larkin anyways, which is fine. I mean, he was Prince Larkin. Whatever way they come to that conclusion is okay. But they still weren't sure. But the other thing that happened when they were looking through the Vision Stone, the other piece of information that they really did need, that I did not intend to give them, was when Winston stood in front of, or between the 2 columns, and they all watched the visions with Winston. And one of them showed him trying one of the magic items that they'd found, and I forget what the third vision was, but the second vision was very important. The second vision, again, information I was not planning on giving away, was of Bodaway, Winston's true self, and all of the tribesmen and women that were with him, encountering the necromancer's lair. Now, I described the lair. I described it as a room with 6 columns and a red carpet flowing down the center of them towards a throne with a young man sitting on it. A young man with black leather pants. I believe I said he had a russet shirt and flowing golden hair. Above the throne is a giant skull. And on the front and back of all 6 columns is a very lifelike looking statue floating about 6 to 8 feet above the ground and floating off the column, so it doesn't look like it's attached. And I said that Bodaway and the other tribes, men and women, enter the room, and then you see the vision switch, and like half the party is unconscious on the ground, possibly dead. The other half of the party, including Bodaway, is running for their lives, trying to get out of the room. And then the vision faded and it went to like the third vision, whatever one that one was. So that was the part of the vision stone. They got a couple other things from that. I tried to write it down after the game was over, because of course I made all that up on the spot. So I wrote down as much of it as I could remember, but of course I remembered the thing about Bodaway because I knew that was important. I knew I had that encounter planned that they might run into, and I knew, once again, this was an encounter that was going to be way too powerful for them. And I try to give them some clues of that as they're coming up to these encounters, or in some way set it up so they have some way of either mitigating the power that they're facing, or knowing that this is going to be very powerful. Maybe we shouldn't go in here. So I try and give them clues. And I try as best I can not to just arbitrarily pull punches if they make mistakes. If you're going to walk into the lion's den, you're going to get bit, right? So anyways, but they got that little piece of information that was like an extra warning hint that they weren't meant to get because they'd used the vision stone this way. Kudos to them, right? All right, so they proceed down into the beholder's lair, and eventually they run across the room where they're going to run into the Death Tyrant. Now, as usual, when you're DMing, things don't go exactly as you planned. I had thought that the characters would be in a different part of the corridor where the Death Tyrant is going to come up than they were, but they went into the area that triggered it, and then they kind of didn't go where I thought they were going to go. They turned around and they went back the other way. And because of that, the Death Tyrant popped up through the tube it was going to come up in, and ended up actually behind the characters. And the way I had this plan was it was going to pop up that tube, after they had gone by it, and then it was going to come after them, because the Death Tyrant sees the player characters as finally a way to get the upper hand. Because the Death Tyrant, his big eye does not cast an anti-magic cone. His big eye casts I forget exactly what it's called, but basically it's a cone that if he kills you or you die and the cone is on you, you will be raised back up as a zombie under his control. So he figures if he can kill these characters off before the beholder finds them and raise them up as zombies, that now he's got some cannon fodder that he can send at the beholder while he's trying to get the upper hand. And maybe, just maybe, he can kill this beholder and take over its lair. Now, if you read up on beholders, and Death Tyrants are a type of beholder, you know that they're very egotistical. They believe that they are the pinnacle of evolution, that nothing is smarter than them, or more capable of surviving than them, or more capable of taking on a big encounter than them. They just believe they're the cat's meow. And each beholder thinks that they're the cat's meow, not that all beholders are the cat's meow, but they themselves are the pinnacle of evolution. So the Death Tyrant pops up out of that tunnel. The characters have gone the wrong way. they see him pop up. I think there was, I believe it was Winston was actually standing next to the hole when it came out, and it pops up and it starts attacking them. And I think one of the characters, I believe it was Jeff, got hit by a sleep ray and failed to save and fell unconscious. Which kind of was not part of my plan. I was, hoping that nothing like that would happen, where one player was incapacitated and the players wouldn't be able to run if they wanted to. But it was just a sleep ray, so really no harm done, and the character gets a save every single round. So from my viewpoint as the DM, I'm like, okay, let the chips fall where they may, and eventually he'll save and he'll wake up and they can run then, right? And plus I know the beholder is right around the corner and is going to come in and find the Death Tyrant, and then it's on, right? Now the other thing that the Death Tyrant did was he shot one beam at Myas, and true to the vision that they had earlier, Myas gets a look of horror on his face and then eventually turns to dust right before their eyes. Now this is kind of like the opening warning shot. I had this planned from the beginning, before this encounter started. And as soon as I started drawing up the beholder encounter, I knew this was, pretty serious stuff for 4th level characters to run into. And I do tend to throw stuff like this at my characters on occasion. Most of the time I find that they rise to the occasion and they defeat the monster. This, however, I knew was a little over the top, and like I said, I created a situation where I thought they would have a chance. The other thing that I did, though, is I play tested it weeks before the session came about. And I did this by rolling, some of the rolls for the beholder's first attack. So I had, I think, the first 3 rounds of attacks from the Death Tyrant already pre-planned, all random, mind you, but pre-planned, so I knew it was going to happen. So there'd be no surprises the night of the session. And one of those things that happened when I was pre-planning this is the first roll, one of the rays was a disintegration ray. Now, I have to say, I had been watching some Matthew Colville, and I had watched some things about, when to kill characters, when not to kill characters, and how to make it so the characters don't die without actually manipulating the dice. And one of the things that he said was, always know what your character's skill sets are and what their saving throws are. And when you get into a situation like this with a monster that has like an instant death type attack, you can throw that attack at someone who has a better chance of saving for it. Yeah, you're manipulating the situation a little bit, but it's not like you're changing the roles. You were just changing who was getting attacked by it. So when the disintegration ray came up in my playtesting, the first thing I did was I looked at everybody's saving throws to see who had the highest saving throws. And ironically, Myas and Simon, the 2 NPCs, were the ones that had the highest saving throw. I believe it's a dexterity saving throw. They had the highest dexterity saving throw. So it was one of those 2 that was going to get hit with this in the first round. And the characters all really like Simon. And of course, Myas is the bad guy. And I honestly didn't even know if Myas would make it to this point, knowing that Laudus's cover would be blown by now. I didn't know if Myas would get down to the point where they were attacking the beholder, or if they would do something before then, like kick him out of the party, or maybe even attack him and kill him. None of that happened, so he did make it down to the beholder, thankfully, because if he hadn't, that beam would have went on somebody else. Probably Simon, I'm guessing, because he's the next up as far as having a good dexterity save. But it didn't. It went to Myas. So I knew this going into the session, and so when they came across the Vision Stone, it was a natural for me to pick that as one of the visions, because it's something I knew was going to happen in the future. I already had it pre-planned, so I didn't really have to make it up. And furthermore, I knew that this was going to happen fairly quickly after the Vision Stone, and so in a way, this would validate the visions that the Vision Stone was giving them. They just saw it upstairs. Now they come down here and bam, it happens just the way they saw it. Now they should be thinking about all the visions the other visions that they saw, and what those things mean. So the Death Tyrant gets a couple attacks. The biggest thing that happens from that is Jeff falling asleep, and I think it tried to move someone with its telekinesis ray over to the air shaft, but couldn't get it far enough. At least that's how I remember it. Not that important anyways. And then the beholder comes out of another air shaft that the players were headed to, and begins attacking the Death Tyrant. Now the Death Tyrant has not killed any of the player characters yet. He doesn't have any cannon fire, so he knows he's still toast. So he starts running right away. He turns around and starts floating in the other direction. Now they don't float very fast. They do 20 feet every round. So he's kind of floating off. The other beholder's kind of floating into view and trying to attack him. Now the other beholder, he does see the player characters, and I think he sends a couple beams their way, hits Winston with something, and maybe hit Idette with something, or attacked her, I forget which. And then as he's going by, for the most part, other than that, ignoring the player characters and trying to kill the Death Tyrant, and the Death Tyrant's just running. The Death Tyrant knows that with the beholder's magic eye, which casts an anti-magic spell, as long as that is on and facing him, none of his eyes work, which is his main weapon. And the beholder knows this from earlier battles as well, and has figured out a strategy where it only turns the eye off when it knows it can attack the Death Tyrant without the Death Tyrant attacking back. And then it turns the eye back on, and Death Tyrant screwed. Now the Death Tyrant can't see the beholder's central eye's beam. It's an invisible beam, unlike the other 10 beams. So it doesn't know when the eye is on and when it isn't, so it just has to figure out strategically when it can actually attack and have an effect. So it's running. The other beholder is floating on, towards it, and is going to try and keep up with it and attack it, and for the most part ignoring the characters. Until Idette, who is like, how dare you attack me, decides to attack the main beholder. And I forget, she threw one of her alchemy potions at it or something like that, and hits it and does a couple points of damage to it. And the beholder kind of does one of these things where it's floating away and it goes at her like, how dare you attack me? I am a beholder. And the Death Tyrant, with one of his 10 eyes, sees this and knows, because the beholder has turned around, his central eye is not facing him anymore, and he spins and he attacks with 3 of his eyes, 3 random eyes, just like the book says. And one of them succeeds and paralyzes the beholder. So now it's on. The Death Tyrant is like, this is my chance, and he keeps shooting beams at the beholder, and I let it be random, like the book says, rather than being strategic. And he just kept beaming at the beholder. The beholder kept failing certain saves, but it was all things like paralysis, stun, sleep, things like that weren't killing the beholder, but were incapacitating it. So the battle kept going on, but he wasn't dying. Meanwhile, while this is going on, Winston and I think one other player character might have, I'm not really sure which one it was, were attacking the Death Tyrant with ranged weapons. The rest of the characters, I believe, were attacking the beholder. So the characters had split with no plan. They just kind of split who they were attacking, and were attacking either the Death Tyrant or the beholder, and doing some damage to them, slowly whittling them down round after round, while the Death Tyrant is concentrating solely on the beholder. Now, the Death Tyrant, towards the last round or two, actually did get a couple good rays off that gave some necrotic damage. I think one was a death ray, and one might have been whatever the other one is, disintegration ray? Yeah, disintegration ray. Both of which do a significant amount of damage, but the main beholder has a significant amount of hit points, and it didn't kill him, it just brought him down so that he was getting close to death. And with the characters attacking both of them, they kind of were wee-wowing back and forth between who had greater hit points, the Death Tyrant or the beholder. And my fear as the DM was that one of them was going to die significantly ahead of the other, and then the players were going to be in trouble again. But luckily enough, and I didn't massage anything. I let it roll exactly the way it went. They killed the Death Tyrant first. The beholder by this time had 3 or 4 conditions on him and was not able to save through all 3 or 4 of those before the players were able to kill the beholder as well. So now the player characters have killed a Death Tyrant and a beholder, either one of which was, in order of magnitude, about 3 times as tough as what they should be going up against as a very hard encounter. But because of the way I set it up, they were allowed some chance to pull it off, and the dice rolled their way, and they did. They killed both of them. Now at this point, it's been a long battle, very tense, and there was a lot more that we went through besides just this. And it was late in the night, and everybody pretty much got up from the table and, all right, we're out of here, and they left. And that was the end of the session. So they actually did not technically go to sleep yet. And as you know from previous videos, that is the trigger that shuts off their connection to the characters that they're dreaming of. So Jeff had been woken up before the end and did not actually fall asleep for the night. So him being the controlling character for this group, they were still awake, they were still themselves. So when we come back next time, we're coming back to this group. And that's my video for the day. Hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you on the next one when we'll discuss what happens next.